has entered a cannabis commission, and it does have a seat for somebody that has run a compassion program. I will throw my hat in. I am doubtful if I'll get the seat, to be honest with you, because of my outspokenness. But I sure hope if I do throw my hat in that folks will support me and come and say, well, supervisors, even though she talks back to you, she talks back to you in a way that's meaningful to patients. Right. But the downside of the commission is that it only meets 5 times a year. So that's not very many meetings to get much done. Right? So it might be kind of a symbolic gesture, but it's an important gesture because what happened this last, I'd say about 3 years, is that we had this cannabis state legalization task force at the local level, which was basically staffed with mostly guys who owned dispensaries and it was mostly white guys that own dispensaries in Castro, let's be real about it, and people that would say yes to whatever they proposed.
Chance.
No, I mean, it was more like Spark, Apothecarium, and Green Cross, and that's all really elite. Even for the business owners, that's a very elite slice, and it's not necessarily representative. So not just me, but a lot of people were questioning sort of what was going on, and I think that that's how we got to the point where Sandra Fewer decided that, hey, enough people have raised concerns that this isn't necessarily a representative task force, that maybe we should fix that somehow. And so I think that this was kind of her fix. And then we have another piece at the local level, which is from Mayor Breed and Raphael Mendelman, who is the supervisor from the Castro district. And it's some repairs to the equity portion of the bill. I haven't really gone into it very deeply. It's very business orientated fixes in the code. But I will go over it and analyze it and bring it back to you all and see if there's any way sort of the patient voice enters in it, or if there's any way that we can help shape whatever they're doing to make it more patient focused. One of the things that I'm really excited about in this weird way is that a lot of people now across the whole state at every level, from the patient to the business owner to the grower, is really questioning Prop 64 and that it really didn't work, right? And it really didn't work for just about every part of the industry. There's only like about 3% of the industry that thinks that, wow, that law really worked and really helped everybody. There's seriously, so there's a lot of, I think, push to reform, replace, repeal Prop 64 in 2020, or maybe even sooner, right? So that's really exciting. It's really unfortunate, though, that, even at the state level, even if you hear our Senator Wiener say, well, I'm going to re-enter this corporate compassion piece, well, that still means that all the compassion programs are going to be shut for probably the next 4 to 6 months because, excuse me, even if it's the bill's marked urgency after it's vetoed by the governor so that it can be reintroduced, it still has to go through a process, and I'm really sad because what I feel like that will do, and I hope that I'm wrong, you guys, I so hope that I'm wrong, but I think that what it could effectively do is really discourage the newer compassion programs, right, from continuing. I think it can really set in place that the retail clubs have a way to say, hey, we're not allowed to do it, and then getting ready to say we won't do it, you know, or we don't have to do it, you know. And with Senator Wiener's law, by the way, it did not require any of these businesses to have a compassion program. And a lot of the lingo with that is like, oh, we just, you know, cannabis is just like any other business. No, it's not. You built your business on the backs of medical cannabis activists who you've now priced out of a life-saving, you know, quality of life essence to their life. I mean, I can't afford, when I go into a cannabis store, I look at, I can't afford anything. That's not in my budget. I'd be like, okay, my dog doesn't get to eat this month and I don't get any coffee. That would be really bad. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
So, you know, and I don't know how even people who have a full-time job are affording to put cannabis in their budget if they use it as a medicine, because I feel, because I'm, you know, pretty darn sick, I smoke a lot. I need to smoke a lot. So, you know, I don't know what other people's experiences are, you know, with the stores right now, but I really feel. Sure, I'll hear the experience.
My experience is I have $10.
Right?
Go in there, I said, $10, they say something to join. I said, do you got veteran prices? They go, well.
There's no veteran
You
discount.
got about $50. Excuse me, you got about $50, and then they give you 10%. I said, you'll never see it. And by the way, I take your $10 and go downtown to the brother man and
Nothing's wrong with the people's market, you know? Nothing's wrong with the people's
I
market.
left. I don't put it on.
Good people break stupid laws.
But I think that's the general experience that I'm hearing from my friends and fellow activists, is that, you know, they can't afford it. We're having people think that compassion means if you make a large purchase next time when you come back, maybe you'll get a few dollars off. And I want people to know something. Our organization in 2006, 2007 passed a resolution at the Board of Supervisors which gave the policy direction to all of the local club owners that they should have a compassion program and that they should have a reasonable veterans discount. Axis of Love has always been there for veterans. We started the first veterans group. I'm really happy that, you know, veterans have, you know, kind of had a moment of sovereignty and self-directed and started their own groups. But, hey, hi. But, you know, it's really sad that most of the clubs now do not have a veterans discount, and that is something that our organization passed at the board level, and it was what's called a non-binding resolution, which means that it doesn't have the force of law. It has the force of directing the club owners that this would be something that the local government would appreciate. And to hear that they're not even doing the veterans discount is just horrid to me. So we got to get back on that. So, hey, I'm Shona. Hi. Nice to meet you. So I want to give you a little bit of background about Axis of Love, and then we'd love to hear from you, and we might have a few questions. But the background of Axis of Love is that we have been sort of the patient's voice. Hey, you guys. We have been the patient's voice at City Hall for low-income medical cannabis patients, most of whom live in your district. And we had a community center for 10 years at 1260 Mission, which has now been taken over by the YIMBY movement, and I was priced out along with most of the nonprofits that served that area. So that was a little bit hard for us because because what we discovered is that cannabis harm reduction for the last 18 years is what we've been doing. We know it works. This is the group that meets every Thursday at 4:20 called Choices. And what we do is we have the ability to give people a little bit of medicine, and we talk about how cannabis has helped us with harm reduction, whether you're quitting drinking, you know, whatever you're getting on and going for that clean and green path. It's not, you know, you have to be clean and green, but that is the goal. So it's harm reduction with the goal of being, you know, just using cannabis. And we know it works, and we're trying to have, you know, the city realize that we'd like to see harm reduction centers back on the ground. The beautiful thing was that the San Francisco Community Health Center realized that there was a significant community loss with our community center getting closed, and they offered us a community partnership so that I'm able to hold my women's group and my harm reduction here twice a week. Without that, we'd be in the park, you know, and that's a really sad and unfortunate thing. And in this district, we have such an unbalance. We have the uber corporate headquarters like Spark and these other guys who just, you know, I mean, that's corporate cannabis, right? And then you have the entire community that's lived in this area for decades, and you know, we're used to clubs like HopeNet, the club that I was a partner in, Sanctuary, Divinity Tree. All of the compassionate clubs, interestingly enough, got turned over to the federal government of this district. And a lot of those clubs were shuttered, and we still have not gotten back on the ground yet. So definitely there's a couple asks that we have right away for anybody that's considering this district, and that is one, entering compassion legislation, which I might have a meeting with Supervisor Safai on. And two, that we need harm reduction centers that are cannabis-based more than ever. We have an exploding.
I'm sorry, is this different than the idea of saving reduction sites?
Yes.
They would be, even if we have saving reduction sites, they would still be different.
Well, it's different in the sense of cannabis harm reduction isn't just about a clean needle, right? It's a whole community discussion. It's fellowship. Some people are not intravenous users. They might be trying not to drink, whatever. When my community center, I had the full gamut, and I had people that had been sober for, you know, two decades that were involved in the activism and getting the poor people's voice back into cannabis and the disabled people's voice back into cannabis, because we've had such a huge corporate takeover. But enough about us. Let's hear about you. So everybody, let's give a warm welcome to Christine Johnson.
Well, thank you guys for having me today. I do apologize for being a few minutes late, but I'm really glad that you guys are all here. I won't spend too much time talking about myself. I really, when I have these opportunities, I like to hear questions and concerns from you guys. But before I do that, I am going to ask you about the governor's veto compassionate care legislation.
Right.
And just want to understand your position, if you have one.
I do.
Good, bad, what else can we do? So that's my question for you, but I'll start by talking about myself. So, Christine Johnson, I'm running for District 6 Supervisor. You guys, most of you, I think, live in District 6, but just in case some of you don't, it's Mission Bay, Tenderloin, Soma, from the water to Van Ness, and Treasure Island. So,
let's give a raise of hands. How many people live in the area?
yeah, most of you. All right, most of you. So you guys know where the district is. I'll talk.
Do you have any way that you could give us the voter papers that we can sign up to vote?
Yes.
A voter registration.
Voter registration,
Absolutely.
yeah, we can talk about that a little bit. Yeah, I usually try to carry, I have a couple forms on me today.
Okay, I need one.
But, yeah, cool. Excellent. So I'm talking about myself. So I grew up up in New York City. My mom was a nurse. She worked 2 jobs. It was me and my sister. And even despite her 2 jobs, we had to move a lot. Every couple years, we would get a rent increase letter, and we would have to go. So I had a bunch of childhood bedrooms versus I had some other friends who just had one, and they could point to marks they made on the walls, preschoolers, and I didn't have that. So from an early age, I wanted to spend my life making cities a place where everybody could be, no matter where you come from, how much money you make, what your life looks like. I thought I wanted to be an architect, but I cannot draw, so that dream died. And it was real sad. I was like, I'm gonna be like Frank Gehry, like I'm gonna do it. And anyway, so I studied engineering, and I went into my professional career of public finance. So I went to Smith College, which is in Massachusetts, women's college. Not important. What's important is that I ended up out here in 2004, and I moved to Treasure Island. So I've actually lived in the district for 14 years. So I lived in TI. I lived on TI for about 8-9 years, and I'll just say I definitely believe in harm reduction. Actually, from my time living on Treasure Island, there's a lot of houses that are just like adults, roommates who live together, but there's also a lot of halfway houses, sober houses, transitional housing. So that community is really diverse, and I definitely, from my time there, 8-9 years, got a sense of, you know, people who need help in harm reduction. Actually, one of my neighbors was a baker, and he did his own version of compassionate care baking for some people on the island. So
I didn't even know your neighbor.
Yeah, he would have bake sales during the some of the parties. So it was actually kind of funny. So I digress. So I've lived here for a long time. My career with public finance means I know a lot about money, budget, city administration, how to actually get things done. Very soon after moving to San Francisco, I got hooked up with someone who worked for then Mayor Gavin Newsom, and I got appointed to the Hunters Point Shipyard Citizens Advisory Committee. So from there, 8 years on that, so to have a really good sense of how do you build community? How do you make sure you don't leave out communities that are surrounding it? How do you fight institutional racism when you're building a new community that's coming out of nothing? It's going to brand new shiny stuff. How do you make sure the black and brown people who've been there for generations don't get left behind? That's been 9 years on that. Okay. I guess that's what we're doing. That's fine. Yeah, hit me.
I'm interested to see if you do get hired, get a job. How do you plan to hire people back in the community? You've been here, you've seen what's going on. Obviously, some people are here disabled. Some people, I mean, me myself, I got a personal interest in the 6th District campaign. I mean, I've helped you guys. I've gave you guys suggestions. I've got on the street and did the work. And I follow everyone because I have a personal interest in what's going on. That's why I'm coming to these debates and stuff like that. I don't get paid for it, but I do it because I care about the future of where we're going. It's where San Francisco's going. I've been here for 40 years. You know, I lived in Santa Barbara for a little while, but most life I grew up here. I went to school here, baptized here. I'm a person of the neighborhood. The ups, the downs, the ins, the outs. I want to see you guys start. Mayor Lee was pretty good at hiring people within the community, regardless of if you had a skill, you seen it, you had it, he hired you, he give you a job. I don't see that happening with administration now. I would want to see it happening in the future. We need to be hiring people that are capable of doing jobs in the community and give them a chance.
Yeah.
So it's important to I mean, if you do get the job and you plan on just like hiring some people you've seen along the way that they're advocating and doing other stuff.
Yeah, so let me finish my little just like personal story. I got like 2 more sentences, and then I'll start with yours as the first question. And yes, he's been around. I'm a senior, man. I'm happy for it. So, anyways, yeah. So that was 8-9 years of the Hunters Point Shipyard CAC. I was appointed chair of the Redevelopment Commission in 2012, and then I was on the Planning Commission for 4 years. So I say all that to say I have a background in how to actually get stuff done. And I have a husband and a 2-year-old, so I'm raising my family here too. I really care about cleaning up our streets. We should not be walking around in the situation that we're walking around in right now. And a lot of that is because private property owners are responsible for this. Yeah, and it's insane.
You don't think private property ownership?
Hold on. Let's let her finish.
So let me
answer her question too.
I've spent a lot of time on this, and I'm open to the discussion on it always. But my position right this second is that we have, in our code, it says that property owners are responsible for the sidewalks outside their buildings. And I think it's inequitable. It's why you see the Gold Coast and nice parts of town where people, you know, can pay for help and have all that, and it's beautiful, and down here, it's chaos. There's a lot of reasons, a lot of things going on in the street, but right now the city is not accountable for what we see. So how can you have elected leaders and other leaders who say that they want to clean up the streets when they all know that technically, if something's going on the sidewalk, they're not responsible for cleaning it up. They're just giving a citation to the building owner, right? That's backwards. And so it's something that I've been focused on. It doesn't mean that property owners have no responsibility. It doesn't mean we won't have CBDs or community benefit districts. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means I want the city to be accountable for public spaces. This is something that I really believe in.
What about public nuisance? You know, this creates public nuisance by allowing so much activity. Look, back in the day, my dad was a business owner. She just said.
Can we hold on
Okay,
a
yeah.
second?
I'm sorry.
Let's
Yeah.
let her
No
finish.
question.
I'm gonna answer her question and then I'll take a
I hear
few
about
other.
you, I don't know all that other stuff, I wanna hear what you.
Yes, thank you. So that's my position on clean sidewalks. I also, in order to tackle why the sidewalks are an issue in the first place, I really believe in having appropriate places for everyone to be. That's my umbrella for talking about more navigation centers, more indoor and outdoor public spaces. Whether you are unhoused or not, there's a major issue with people not having anywhere to go. And that's separate from the jobs issue. There's people who live in SROs who don't have anywhere to be during the day, so they just take a chair from their unit and they sit on the sidewalk all day, and they don't want to be there. And it's problematic for people using public spaces. So, you know, we got a lot of issues with vacancies, commercial vacancies, but also not enough places for people to be. So I want to marry those two things. And just as we were talking about Axis of Love, getting evicted from 1260 Mission, you know, this is something where I'm really focused on changing our planning code so more spaces like Axis of Love that are community spaces can actually be on our ground floor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but technically right now, one of the issues we have is that what you do would be considered an office use. And so it's not retail or active ground floor, and so it would be really hard to get you in a ground floor space when all around we look around and we see vacant spaces. So there's a lot of work we can do in our planning code that would really help, and then that would help me as a supervisor hopefully put pressure on the landowners to not keep their spaces vacant and allow nonprofits to be in those spaces. So this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. It's not just about saying I'm going to fight for community or I'm going to I'm going to advocate. It's about what are you actually going to do, and do you understand why things are an issue right now? And that's what I try to communicate to people. I spent 14 years really understanding why a lot of things are an issue, and I have a lot of ideas on what exactly to fix. Not just saying I'll fight for you or you can come talk to me or I'll advocate for you, because that's up here. That's up here headline stuff, and that doesn't actually, that doesn't get things changed. So those are my big things. I have a whole platform on housing, but I think there's a whole lot of questions, unless you guys want me one more minute on the housing piece, or?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll talk about housing. So housing, in this district it looks a little bit different, right? Because we've taken most of the new development in the city. So for me, what I want to focus on is housing access and fairness. There's three things that I really want to focus on as supervisor. The first one is I want to reform the inclusionary housing lottery system. It is inequitable and unfair, and I'm not just
Yes. People in the lottery.
and I'm not just making that up. The city has to write a report to HUD, federal HUD, every couple of years, talking about whether or not their systems are an impediment to fair housing access. And they wrote in a report that the lottery system is an impediment to fair housing.
Yes, it
So
is.
I'm not just making that up. It's actually a real problem. 1 second. Let me just finish up. The other thing is I've become increasingly concerned with SRO management. How many of you guys live in SROs? Yeah, I've become increasingly concerned with SRO management.
Yeah, thanks.
I've been hearing, so for example, ECS, that not only runs shelter, they also run some halfway houses, transitional housing, and SROs. I've been hearing a lot of things about concerns about the management, how they're not only how they're treating people, but how they're using resources. Troubling things like, nonprofits that are getting money that are supposed to go to food pantry, but people aren't getting the food that they're supposed to get, right?
Hello.
And these are things that were shocking to me. Like, I know we've always had a niche and a need to like sort of audit our nonprofits and make sure we're spending money appropriately. But when I started hearing these complaints directly from folks who lived in these buildings, I know that there's a larger issue. So those are really the two big issues that I'm focused on. And then I'm happy to answer other questions. And let me go in order. I want to start with your local hire question because you asked it early, but then I'm not going to go to the other one. I want other people to have an opportunity. So thank you guys for having me. That's a little bit of my platform. We're going to do questions. Let me start with him, and then we'll go here for a question. And you in the back, because you had your hand up for a while too. So local hire. Yes, I am very focused on making sure that people have opportunities in this district. There's a couple things. As a supervisor, I would only have 3 people on my staff, so it's not like I'm going to be able to hire the whole district. But there's other things that I want to do. We've been talking about funding pit stops. We've been talking about funding more public spaces. These are opportunities for jobs, right? And then we'll talk about some of the bigger companies in just a second. But those are opportunities for jobs. Hamilton Family Services runs those pit stops. I have been advocating for funding to make them 24 hours. To me, that means more jobs. And people who are working there, I've talked to them. You know, some of them were formerly homeless. Some of them now have a job with benefits for the first time in years. You know, some of them were able to come back and afford the rent in their SRO because they have that job. So that's real, and I want to make sure that we have that. It's for people who live in District 6 first, and then we can, you know, and we have the higher legislation. So I'm not just making that up out of thin air. We can actually do that.
You know, I'm pressing for everything.
Yes, everything. And then the tech companies. I think the Twitter tax break is sunsetting. But no, honestly, there's been a citywide push on that. You know, I'm definitely going to be making sure they work with like Code 10 to 1 and that they're doing more local hire for everything, not just, you know, everyone's saying engineers and people are like, well, I'm not an engineer, but they hire for everything. They have, you know, I want people to get pipelines to the unions. They have cleaning staff. They have people who work in the corporate cafeterias. They have a lot of different kinds of jobs. So I will definitely be focused on measurements for local hires because they have not had that before. Nothing measured, nothing gained.
And our unemployment rate is about, what, 4% for those who can't work? In the city,
Yeah.
right?
It's like still like 3%.
3%, yeah, okay.
And sorry, so back here, right here.
Okay, about the housing, I want to know about the housing, is because if they would, repair some of them apartments they have up there on Betrayal, because nobody is renting up there, they just finding vacant houses and moving in.
On Potrero Hill?
Yeah, and I mean, if I didn't have my SRO, I would go up there and find me a spot and get me and rent free all month.
Ooh, all right, good
Why don't
question.
they do something about that?
So, good question. They actually are. There's something called Hope SF, and they are rebuilding. I think you're talking about the Potrero Hill
Yeah,
housing development.
yeah.
They are currently rebuilding that. So the reason why it looks empty is that they have been moving people out. They're about to start demolishing those buildings and rebuilding that public housing because it's dilapidated, it's falling apart. The housing authority's been a mess, and so we now are rebuilding that and Alice Griffith.
Okay.
So that's why it may look a little empty, but it's not going to be soon.
That look like a ghost town.
It is a ghost town. They've been moving people out. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep track.
So I see a question back there, and I see Lucy, Pam, Denise, and then I wanted to answer your question really quick
Okay.
about 829, if that's okay.
Yes, that's fine.
So, before Christine got here, we were talking a little bit about Scott Wiener's Compassion Bill 829. So when it started out, it had a permit category for compassion groups. It was a bait and switch from the corporate cannabis working with the senator. We were not invited to the table. We're one of the longest running compassion groups in San Francisco. They retold the story of compassion with a basically white male gay face and kind of erased everybody here. So number one, there was not a fair process. Number two, it was a switch and bait. So we're like, okay, cool. At least there's a permit that could be available for us, and I could apply for the equity program in San Francisco, and then hopefully San Francisco would help levy to the state that I couldn't afford the fees to, because I don't have an extra, say, $1 million. And then they switched and took that off and made it so that it was only corporate welfare. So only the retailers could do it if they desired to, and not have to pay the taxes. And then if there was a compassion group